this video, we take a look at the transition component for Headless UI Vue. More specifically, we're going to look at how it allows us to orchestrate multiple elements that need to transition in and out of the page based on the same state property that changes. Let's get right into it. All right, here's the example we're going to work with in this lesson. So we have a simple profile card thing, and then a button that allows us to hide it and show it. This is built with a super simple Vue 3 app, and we have a single piece of state here, show, which is set by default to be false. If I scroll up here, you can see that we have a button. When we click that button, we change the value of show to the opposite. And finally, if I come right at the top, you can see that here we're using vShow to determine if we should show the profile card or not. Currently, when I click on the button, the profile card jumps into the page. It appears really abruptly in and out. And we want to apply some sort of transition to this element when it comes in, maybe slide in from the right a little bit and also fade in gradually. We also want to apply a different animation to this image when it appears and the text as well. We could use the built-in transition component in Vue.js to achieve that, but since we want to animate 3 different things that rely on the same state property, it would be kind of nice if we can somehow nest these transitions together and have only one transition take care of when to show or not for all of the others. For this job, we're going to use Headless UI's transition component, which comes with a transition root component and a transition child component, which can be nested inside of it. So let's open the terminal, and I'm going to npm install @headlessui/vue. Okay, great. Now let's come down here in our script tag, and I will import the transition root and transition child components from headlessui/vue. And let me also register these components here, and I'll go and grab them and paste them here. Like so. All right, so now, as always, Headless UI doesn't provide any styles, and it's up to us to go and use these different properties within the transition root component to apply styles as we see fit. What we want to do now is come in this div with the vShow prop and replace this with our transition root component so it can take over this responsibility of showing and hiding the element. So I'm going to replace that with transition root. We need to tell this transition root whether it should or should not show. And for this, we're going to use a show attribute. And we're going to set it to our state property of show. Our toggle button should still work exactly the same. And yep, it does. But now it's the transition root component that determines whether this card should show or not. Okay, right now, when I click the button, you can see that this card appears abruptly in and out. What we want to do is add a smooth little transition animation. So maybe the card fades in and also slides in a little bit from the right when it appears initially and also fades out when it disappears. We need to tell our transition root component how it should animate and transition the element. And for this, we're going to give it 6 different props. Enter, enter from, and enter to. And these 3 will be responsible for the entering transition. I know, surprise, right? And then we're going to have 3 props for leaving as well. So leave, leave from, and leave to. I'll start with the enter prop. And this prop is for the classes that we want to be applied to our element during the entire entering transition. So here I want transition, transform, and we'll apply a duration of 300 milliseconds and an easing timing function of ease out. Next, enter from is the starting point of our entering transition. So we're going to go with translate x4 and opacity of 0. So it's going to start completely transparent and slightly to the right. And then for the enter to, which is the final stage of our transition, we're going to go with translate x0 and opacity 100. Let's take a look. Nice. So you can see that the card slides in from the right and fades in over 300 milliseconds. But currently, when we hide it, it just abruptly disappears. And so we're going to fill our leave transition props here. I'll copy this from the enter because it's very similar. We just want to reverse the ease out to ease in. And we'll keep it really simple here. We'll start with an opacity of 100% and we'll fade out to an opacity of 0. So now our card will slide in from the right and then just fade out as it goes away. Very nice. Like I mentioned earlier, I also want to apply different transition animations to our image and our text here. Currently, everything moves in as a block. And so that's where we're going to use our transition child component. We're going to wrap our image here in a child component, and we're going to wrap our block of text in another transition child component. So I'll scroll down past the transition here. And so here's our image, and we want to wrap this in a transition child. So let's go transition child and move the closing tag after the image. And looks like we've broken our image and squished our poor Floofy McFloof. Looking at the HTML markup generated in the browser, you can see that between our card wrapper component here and our image, we now have this extra div that has been placed. And because this container is a flex container, this messes up the layout a little bit. And so this has been rendered as a div, and it's the default behavior for the transition component. But you can always change what element it gets rendered as with the as prop. So here we want to get rid of this div, and we can render it as a template instead, so it's going to disappear in the markup. And this should fix our image. Yep. And in our markup, we don't have this extra div in between the image and the wrapper. And you can see right above, we also have another div here, which is our transition root component. So we can probably come up here and also render this one as a template as well. All right, so now it's gone. We have our background div and then the card itself and the image. Okay, let's go wrap the text part of the card into another transition child component. So here it's this div here. And in this case, we want to keep this div because it's one of the flex children. And if we remove it, it's going to change things around. So we're going to replace this with a transition child component, but we're going to render it as a div so it stays as it is. Okay, so now we need to apply some transition props to both our transition child components. They do not need the show prop. They don't have to handle this because the parent transition root component here is taking care of it with the show prop. But what we need to do is apply these 6 transition properties to these. So I'm going to copy these and come in my first transition child and paste these. And I'll also come down here and paste them to the second transition child. At this point, if I toggle the card on and off, it's going to behave exactly as before because we have replicated the exact same transition styles to the 3 transition components. But now we're going to go and change this. Let's start with our image. So I'll come up right here. We want our image to spin or rotate maybe 90 degrees and also zoom in as well as fading in when it transitions in. So I'll keep the same enter classes for now, and I'll keep opacity 0. But for the enter from, we're also going to have rotate 90 and scale 50. So that's the starting point. And the ending point will be opacity 100, but also rotate 0 and scale 100. So we start with a 90-degree rotation, scale down by half and opacity 0, and we arrive to a rotation of 0 and a full scale and full opacity. We'll keep everything the same for the leave transition, and I'll come down to the second transition child here. Once again, we'll keep the enter classes the same. And here for the enter from, we'll change translate x4 to translate x12. So it accentuates the text sliding from the right when it comes in. And I think we can keep everything else the same. Nice, that's very cool. So you can see this image rotated. I'll toggle it one more time. And the text here slides from the right. And that about wraps it up for this transition component video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.